Good morning. This is Greg Lord. Thank you for joining us this morning for our overview and demonstration of the new online FON system called FOResT. This session is being recorded, and the way this will go is Dan Jacobs will initially do an overview, probably 45 minutes or so, and then we'll take a short break, and then I will do a in-depth demo, go through the process of setting up an account as well as filing a notification in the new system. Before I hand it off to Dan, I just wanted to just go over, if you're not familiar with using Teams, just going to share my screen here. And so we're asking everyone just to keep your microphones muted and your cameras off, just to save everyone's bandwidth. And to mute your microphone, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little image of a microphone. Just make sure that that's clicked with a slash in it, meaning it's muted. And to turn off your cameras, just to the left there's a camera, and just make sure there's a slash through it so that it's off. If you have a question during the process or questions, you can either raise your hand. There's a little smiley face with a hand raised. You click on that. That'll let us know that you have a question, and we can call on you, and you can unmute yourself and ask your questions or comments. Then just to the left of that at the top, there's a little show conversation button. If you click on that, the right-hand side has a discussion or place where you can put your question or messages down in the lower part of the right section. Just type it in there and then click on the little paper airplane, and that'll send it so that we can see your question or comment. I do want to say that this is still a work in progress, so we are open to comments, questions, and criticisms of the system, and we'd like to hear them just so that we can improve the process for everyone. Before I hand it off to Dan, I would like to thank our internal team. We did have a bunch of people from the outside, from the public side, test this out and continue to give us feedback, as well as our internal staff, which includes Stephen Nicholas, Adam Cates, Greg Miller, George Harris, Joe Mintz, Don Mancius, Morton Mosswild, and Dan Jacobs. And with that, I'm going to let Dan take over with his presentation.
Can you hear me, Greg?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen and get into the presentation.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay, we'll get started. My name is Dan Jacobs, and I'm a Maine Forest Service District Forester. The area that I work in is primarily southern Aroostook County, and I haven't been on the project team for very long. I helped do some testing of the demo version last year, and I've been doing some of these overview presentations this year. So like Greg said, this will be a brief overview of the system. It will take approximately 45 minutes. We'll have a short break, and then Greg will get into a live demonstration of the product. One thing I'll mention before I forget is sometimes I refer to a FON, which is the notification. So a FON and a notification mean the same thing, and I'll use those two terms interchangeably today. This overview is about the new online system for creating a notification, and the system is called FOResT. This slide just gives a few bullet points on the topics that we're going to cover today. Obviously, this is a brief overview, so it's not going to go into the detail that Greg will. We're going to go over a little bit of the history of the notification system. We're going to talk about the rationale. This will be very brief. Then we'll go into the actual overview where I will discuss some of the basic functions of the system. We'll do an example walkthrough in terms of creating a notification. And like I said a couple times now, Greg is going to go into it in very much more detail when he does the live demo. And we'll talk briefly at the end about the timeline for rollout, what to expect, and I'll give you some tips on how to get some additional information. So we'll start out with the history of the notification process, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this system already, and you know a little bit about the history. But this notification process went into effect with the 1989 Forest Practices Act. The earliest notification that I've seen is dated 1991, so it probably went into effect and was operational in 1990 or 91. Up to this point, this has all been done on paper, and paper gets passed back and forth through the mail. The process has required live signatures. All this data has been entered by Forest Service staff into a computer system in Augusta manually, and that's taken a lot of manpower and time over the years. The other parts of this that have also been on paper for the past 30 years, we've had an amendment process. So if your harvest changes to some degree, you can amend your notification. And there has also been a paper year-end landowner report. So this is all going to be moving to the electronic system. And we'll talk about the timeline briefly in just a bit. But some of the reasons behind moving to this electronic system, really it's going to move us away from paper and into the 21st century. It's probably going to almost eliminate incomplete notifications. So if you've ever received a notice of an incomplete notification, when this is fully implemented, those should be non-existent. And also we have a lot of storage space that's taken up with all this archived paper material. As I've said, we have spent a lot of time doing data entry, and there's been a lot of postage spent both ways on sending paper back and forth through the mail. So hopefully this system will, you'll find it to be an improvement over paper, and it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but in the end, I think it'll end up being appreciated. So some of the background on the notification process and the regulations. The rules for notifications are found in Chapter 26 of the Maine Forest Service Rules. There's a link here on this slide. You can also find these on the Maine Forest Service website and on the Secretary of State website. So there are some exemptions to the fawn requirements, which you can look up in the Chapter 26 rules, but essentially everybody that's harvesting timber needs to fill out a notification form with, as I said, a few exemptions. Currently with the paper system, there's a 6-digit number that is located on each pre-printed form. The number is in the lower corner of the form. This number is required to be posted at your primary wood yard or at the primary access to multiple yards. This number is also required on trip tickets for wood being sold to mills or wood that is being hauled to their first place of measurement. So there are some requirements with the fawn that are set by the Chapter 26 rules, And just as a quick note, and I'll probably mention this a couple more times throughout the presentation, the 6-digit number will now be a 7-digit number, and it will be issued after the notification is complete. So there is a change right up front that is being made. As I've already mentioned, and you guys probably gather, FOResT is an online system for creating forest operations notifications. It also allows you to manage the notifications that are under your account. It will eventually, by the end of this year, allow you to do your landowner report through the system. Currently, I'm sure there's going to be a question on this, but currently there is no mechanism to do an amendment with this system. And that is one of the things that Greg and the team are working to address right now. Just a couple more things. Excuse me, I'm looking at my notes for just a second. Like Greg said, we've been working on this for quite some time. The team has over a year into this. There are still some things that need to be improved based on the questions and comments we've received. And hopefully we'll get some good feedback today to help make this the best product that it can be. Some of the key features of FOResT. One of the big things that's underlined at the top here is that FOResT should make intuitive sense when you go to use it if you have done paper FONs in the past. The process follows the paper form very closely. The questions are either almost identical or identical to the paper. It's set up very much like the paper FON. Of course, there are some differences, and you'll see that as we go through the presentation today. But I think you'll find it fairly easy to use. And I'm no computer wizard, but I've been using it for several months, and I've found it fairly easy to use. One thing that's going to be a big difference is everybody that's submitting a FON, everybody that is putting their name on a FON has to have an online account. And I'll talk about that in some detail, and then Greg will show you how to set up an account. Number 2, the heads-up digital mapping of harvest areas, roads, and stream crossings. That's a very nice feature of this system, the digital mapping. It's fairly easy to use. If you've used Google Earth or Google Maps in the past, this should be pretty simple for you to navigate. Throughout the entire process of filling out a notification, there is some guidance that's given. You'll see little circles with an eye in some locations. Clicking on those will give you some information as to how to fill out the form. This relies on digital signatures that are basically linked to the accounts that you're going to set up. When a notification is certified, everybody gets notified, and there is going to be an automatic notification to complete your year-end landowner reports. So the automatic notification, just going back to point number 5, everybody that's listed on notification is going to get an email that they need to review the summary information and certify and accept it. So everybody's going to know if they're put on a notification. This is the homepage for FOResT, and there's 2 buttons on the main Forest Service webpage that will take you to this homepage for FOResT. There's a big button in the middle of the Forest Service homepage, and I think there's a smaller button in the upper right, the main Forest Service homepage. And it will take you to the FOResT webpage. On there, there's a ton of information about this system. And there is also buttons to both sign in and to create accounts. And so if you don't already have an account, you would create an account. And you can see, if you can see my cursor, the sign in button in the upper right and the create an account in the lower right of the screen. So this is a brief list of the functions in FOResT, and in a manner it goes through kind of the process of creating a notification, starting with creating an account. And everybody, like I said, that's named on a notification needs to have an account set up. We'll talk about that briefly in a minute. If you already have an account, you can sign in to an existing account. And from there, you can start a new notification. The first thing that you're going to do when you start a new notification is on the overview page, or overview step, I believe, is identify your role in the harvest. At this point, only a landowner or designated agent can be the notifier. The landowner or designated agent may also be a forester or a harvester. But the two, as in the paper fawn, the two parties that are needed for a complete fawn are a landowner and a harvester. Once you've identified your role in the harvest, you will move to the digital map section, where you will identify the harvest location, stream crossings, and roads. And we'll go into the mapping in a little bit of detail in a minute. As long as a notification is in draft form, you can edit that draft. Once it's been certified, it becomes a pending notification, and there is no way to edit a pending notification. And we will talk about that in a minute. One of the nice things about this system is that you'll see in just a minute is from the dashboard, you can view and sort of manage your active, inactive, pending, and draft notifications. So right when you enter FOResT, you're going to go to the dashboard, and it will give you a nice overview of the activity in your account. As far as creating an account goes, pretty simple process. Mentioned before that everybody that's being named on a notification will need to have an account. There is, on the FOResT homepage, there is a create an account button that you can see right here. What you will need to create an account is you will need an email address, and you will need to create a password. And of course, you will enter in your name and your contact information. The password will have to meet the state security requirements, and Greg is going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Not too difficult. And once you have created an account, you will be issued a FOResT ID number. And this is an important number to keep track of and to remember. But just to get into FOResT and start the process of a notification, you will always need your email address and your password. So if you have an account and you want to sign into that account, this is the process that's going to be used. I already touched on this just a little bit. On the FOResT homepage, there is a sign in button. And so just so everybody's aware, the rest of this presentation is going to have a lot of screenshots, and they are just small sections of the actual screen that you will see when you're in FOResT. So that was just the best way to do this presentation. So bear with us on that. Greg will show you the entire screen when he's doing the live demo. So the FOResT page has a sign-in button, the FOResT homepage. Clicking on that, you will then be asked for your email and password. And once you've entered your email and password, you will be taken right to the dashboard, which you can see down here in the lower right of my screen. There is going to be a better slide of this in just a minute, and we can talk about some of the features of the dashboard, which are pretty nice. Okay, so this is the dashboard, and I think there are some circles that are going to come up to key into certain features. In the dashboard, you can do several things. There is a button to create a notification. So if you don't have one already in the works, a draft that has been saved, let's say, you can create a new notification. The other thing that I'll point out is that there are a couple of boxes here with information in them. We have a box at the top for pending notifications. These are ones that have been certified and they are waiting to be completed. So these are sort of in the process, in the pipeline, but not fully completed yet. And you can see that there is no, for that pending certification for Belfast, there is no notification number that has been issued yet. Once that notification is completed, then a notification number will be issued. And you can see that down here in the active notifications. This one for Trescott Township has a 7-digit notification number assigned to it. And that number, as you'll see a little further down the road in the presentation, will be sent to everybody that's named on the notification once the notification has been certified by everybody and completed. Another feature here is that you can view the summary information for your pending notifications and active notifications by clicking on this view button. But of course, these notifications cannot be edited. The last thing I will show you is the FOResT ID. You can see a green circle in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. The FOResT ID number will be on in that location for every step of the process of filling out a FON. I've mentioned this before. The only people that can create a notification at this point are a landowner or a designated agent. A notification does require that at least a landowner and a harvester be on the notification. The landowner and the designated agent can have other roles in the harvest. They could be the forester or the harvester as well. But these are the only two parties that can create a notification. So this is going to go over really briefly the steps in creating a notification. And once we click on that Create Notification button, there is essentially 5 major steps to finish the process. And you can see sort of a timeline in the bottom of this screen. And it starts with the overview. That would be your first step in the process. And we will talk about each of these steps in a little bit of detail in just a minute. This is just to kind of give you a heads up, an overview of what the process looks like. The overview is where you will enter some basic information about your role in the harvest and about the harvest location. The next step is the digital mapping. We'll go over that in a little bit of detail. Then we'll talk about the activity details step, which would be the questions such as, is your property enrolled in the Tree Growth Tax Law program? The next step is the contact information. And this is where all the parties that are named on the notification, this is where you're going to enter their last name and FOResT ID, and they will be placed on the notification. And we'll talk about that process in a little bit of detail in a few moments. The last step in the process is the summary, and this is where you will review the information that you have entered, review some important reminders. You will certify that the information you've entered is correct, and that will sort of begin the final process of the final certification and completing the FON. Another thing that I'll probably mention again as we go through this talk, but I'll mention it now as well, is that you cannot move from one step to the next without completing the step that you're on. So for example, I can't move from the overview to the mapping until I've completed everything in the overview. So this is one of the mechanisms I think that's going to help us from having very many incomplete notifications in the future. You just can't move all the way through the process unless you've entered all the information that's required. Now, you can't move from step to step without finishing the step you're on, but as long as the notification is in draft form, you can move back and make changes. And this sort of just reiterates what I was just talking about. The fact that this down arrow on the left-hand side shows the movement through the process, and the fact that you can only move from one step to the next if the step you're working on is complete. As long as you're in a draft version, you can move back and make edits, and that's what's depicted by the up arrow on the right side of the screen. Okay, now we'll go through each step of the process in a little bit of detail, and if anything is not clear as I go through this, I think Greg is going to bring everything together and really make things a lot more understandable with his demonstration. So I'm putting a lot on Greg, but that's the way it is. So once we're in the overview step, the main things that you are going to have to do to complete this, you will indicate your role in the harvest. And for this example, that will carry through the rest of the presentation, I have indicated that I'm the designated agent. You also need to indicate your start date for your harvest. Once you put in your start date, you will automatically get the 2-year maximum time frame, and that is a default mechanism, and that can't be changed. And then you will enter some property details, which is the town that you're going to be working in, the nearest road, and the parcel acreage. So most of this should be very familiar if you've filled out the paper notification in the past, almost identical to what you've had to do prior to this. Once that's complete, you will move on to the mapping step. And this really does have some nice features associated with it. It's pretty easy to use. One of the really neat things about this is you will be centered on the town, in the middle of the town that you indicated you're working in. So you put in a certain town like Amity in the overview, and when you go to the mapping step, you're going to be centered in the middle of that town. If you have used Google Earth or Google Maps in the past, then you'll find moving around in these maps is very similar, and also zooming in and out is very similar. So there is see my cursor here, a plus and a minus that allows you to zoom in and out. And there's also an option for either a topographic background or aerial imagery background. The aerial imagery, from what I've been told, is the most current Esri imagery. The other thing that's kind of a nice feature with this is that you will have, in many cases, the zoning will appear. Now you have to zoom in to a certain level to see the zoning, and this will only appear for towns that have adopted statewide standards and the unorganized LUPC towns. So this town, I believe, is not a statewide standards town because I don't see any zoning, and it looks like there's a water body here. But over to the right, I do see what looks like probably a 75-foot buffer on a stream. So that, I'm assuming, is either a statewide standards town or a unorganized LUPC town. So a pretty nice feature with this is the fact that you are going to get that zoning for many of the towns in the state. I'm going to show you a little bit about what you can do in terms of the mapping in this system. But to start with, the three features that you can map and that you need to map, if applicable, are polygons for your harvest areas, lines for roads, and points for water crossings. We'll go into that in a little bit of detail. But you can have multiple harvest areas on one notification in the same town. If you are working in multiple towns, you need to have multiple notifications submitted, just like in the past. The actual mapping is fairly easy. Greg is going to go into this in some detail, but when you click on one of these buttons for harvesting or for mapping your harvest area, mapping your road, or mapping your water crossing, you will get some directions on how to carry out that process. So here you can see we've clicked on road construction, and we get this little box that gives us information on how to draw the road on the map. A couple of nice features about the mapping here is that once we've drawn our polygon, we will get an area calculation. And we can always edit this polygon until we've saved it. Once we've saved the polygon, the only thing that we can do is delete and start over again. And then you see that we have also a water crossing identified in here, which is, this is line 2 is a water crossing, and point number 2 here is the water crossing. For roads, as you've seen in the other screenshot, I'll bring that up again. The road, you will get your road length in feet. So there's some nice calculations that occur with this mapping when you've completed it. See if I have anything else that I can add here to help out. Okay, I think I've covered everything that I want to on the mapping, and if there's any questions on the mapping, you can either ask before the break or we can have that discussion with Greg. He's going to go into this in much more detail than I have, but the process is really pretty simple, and I think it works well. The activity details step, which is section 3 of the notification, these are based in large part on where you've drawn your activities and the activities that you've drawn. So the questions that are asked in the activity details will change based upon your mapping. A couple of key points here is that the harvest size that you indicate in the activity details section must be smaller than the parcel size you put on your overview page. So you're going to get a message if that doesn't work properly. A couple other key points here. Like I said, the location of your activities has an impact on the questions that you see. So if or that you are asked. So if you're in a statewide standards town, you will get asked some statewide standards questions. If you're an LUPC town, there will be questions that are specific to that. A couple of, one fairly significant change in this section is the change of land use. In the past, the change of land use, if you indicated yes, there's a change of land use, then you had to enter in what the change was to. So if it was going to be potato field, you'd put in potato field. Now it's a menu and the categories are broad. So you would no longer have to pencil in potato field. You would select the agriculture activity or change that's in the menu. Another one of the questions here is the tree growth question, but you can see with the change of land use question, we have indicated no. So we had no menu options to choose from. The contact section, this is the fourth step of the process. And in this example, again, I'm the designated agent. So at a minimum, I've got to enter in a landowner and a harvester. The contact section is where you enter in all the other parties that are associated with the harvest. I've mentioned this before, but to enter somebody into this section of the notification, you will need their last name and FOResT ID. So the nice thing about the FOResT ID and creating accounts is that you shouldn't have a lot of surprise notifications in your email that you were added to a FON because you're hopefully going to keep track of your FOResT ID and know who you've given it to, and hopefully you'll be expecting emails about notifications and not get any surprises. So this FOResT ID does add a bit of a layer of protection to the whole system. Because I was the designated agent in the example, I now have to enter the landowner information, which is the landowner last name and the landowner's FOResT ID. So they will have to have an account set up prior to us working on this FON, and I will have to have their FOResT ID number. Once I've entered the last name and FOResT ID, I click this button, Find Landowner. There has been some confusion with people not clicking on that button, but once you've entered the information in these two boxes, you need to click on Find Landowner. These questions down here may have come in part from the landowner report. I don't remember the type of ownership being a FON question in the past. That may be new, maybe from the landowner report. Number of acres owned in Maine. I believe before you would pencil this in, and now it's options are in a range of numbers, 1 to 10 acres, 11 to 100 acres, etc. So these are probably slightly different than what you've seen in the past. So once the landowner last name and FOResT ID is entered, then it will populate with the landowner information. Again, you also have to click the Find Landowner button to make this populate with the information. Aside from the landowner, we need to enter a harvester operator. And again, this is going to be entering their last name and their FOResT ID. So the harvester needs to have an account set up. You need to have their FOResT ID. You will also have to click this Find Harvester Operator button to get it to populate with their information. And in this case, we put in, just as an example, we put in the last name but no FOResT ID. it wouldn't let us proceed. You've got to have that FOResT ID and click the Find Harvester button to continue. So this is the trickiest part of the presentation for me to go over, because it's a whole bunch of screenshots, one after another, that sort of shows this process of summary, review, and certification. This is the last step in the process for the notifier. And this is where you're going to review all of the information that's been entered by section, and you're going to certify that it is correct. You're going to click an acknowledgement button in terms of some things that you have to be aware of and agree to. And eventually, once this is certified, the summary information is certified, everybody that's listed on the notification is going to get an email. And that email is going to ask them to log into their account and review and certify the information. Once all the parties have certified the notification is complete and acceptable, then a notification number will be generated and issued everybody that's on the notification. So the screenshots don't follow the exact order that you are going to see in FOResT when you fill out a notification. In terms of reviewing the summary information and certifying that it's correct, you are going to be presented with, in this order, the contacts, the overview, the map, the activity details. You're going to be given the main Forest Service contacts, which I believe is the Forest Ranger, Forest Protection, the District Forester, and maybe Forest Health. And then you will be asked to read and certify the important reminders. And we're going to go over most of those through a series of screenshots. Okay, so you can see that this is still a draft version because nothing has been certified as complete yet. Because it's still in a draft version, I can always go back and make changes. Once that status changes to pending, once everything is certified, there's no way to go back and edit the notification. So you can see here that you can review the landowner information, the designated agent information, everybody that was listed on that contacts page. You will be able to review their information and certify that it's correct. This little screenshot from the overview page, you can see that it has a mark as red button at the bottom. That will now say certify as correct. So this presentation is a little bit obsolete. That should say certify as correct. So you will review the contact information, check the box, certify that it's correct. Review the overview information, check the box to certify that it's correct. And like I said, you will do that for each step of the process, for each section. This is a screenshot of the important reminders. There are some general reminders up here about planning in advance, checking with municipalities about local ordinances, and being familiar with the forestry regulations. So those reminders show up for everybody. And then if there's any harvest reminders, road construction reminders, or water crossing reminders, those will show up below. In this case, we indicated that we are going to be doing a stream crossing. So the reminder that we're given for our example is that a permit by rule may be necessary for our stream crossing. So review those reminders and then certify that the information is correct. Once you have certified every section in the FON process, which here again says marked as red, this certify button will become active. So in this case, we haven't checked all the boxes, and our certify button is a gray color. Once we check all the boxes, that will become black, and we can click that button. This illustrates that all the information has been read and certified as correct. Now I can click the certify button. Once I do that, I'm presented with a few questions to acknowledge and certify. These questions, I'm not going to read them all. That would take too long, but these are applicable to the designated agent because in this example, I'm the designated agent. If you were the landowner, you'd be presented with landowner specific questions. So once you check those boxes, you will acknowledge and certify. And now you successfully certified this notification. Click OK. So now you can see that our notification has gone into a pending status because you have certified the notification. And there is no way to go back and make edits to this because only a draft notification can be edited. So the only option that you have now, besides this becoming an active notification, as is to withdraw the notification. And I think Greg is going to talk about that in some detail in his live demonstration. So once the notification is complete and everybody has signed off on the notification, oh, excuse me, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Once the notification is complete, everybody that has been listed on the notification is going to get an email link. That will be the next slide. And they will click on that link, get into their account, review the summary information, and if it's correct, they will certify in the same manner that we did in our example. So getting into that and using the link to certify for everybody that's listed on the harvest is a pretty simple process, and it's done through the email. Once everybody has signed the notification, then FOResT will send out the 7-digit notification number to everybody that's associated with the harvest. And there will also be an option to print the posting sheet, very similar to the posting sheet that we have now. I will mention that there is no way at this point to print out the summary information, which is some people have asked about that, and I think that that is one of the things that is on Greg Lord's list to work on. You can only at this point print the notification number and the posting. This is an example of the email that was sent to the landowner. So in our example, I was the designated agent. The landowner is going to get an email asking them to review the notification and certify. And you can see that there is a little link button at the bottom asking to certify your involvement with this notification. Again, everybody that's listed on the notification is going to get that email. Once everybody has certified, then the notification number will be issued to everybody. So the timeline for FOResT went live January 1st. There's been a lot of people that have been using the system and doing notifications with FOResT up to this point. We are still taking the paper-based FONs at this time. The intent is to phase those out at some point, but we're going to continue accepting those. until we have some option for people that just don't have a computer or access to a computer. So once that's figured out, paper should be going away entirely. This is the last webinar in the series, and I think there's going to be possibly some more coming up in the summer and the fall. And there will probably be maybe some notification regarding those at some point, but they may be also done on request. If you want, you can review all the past webinars on the FOResT webpage. So if you go to the main Forest Service website, you can click on one of the two FOResT buttons, and it will take you to the FOResT page. All the webinars have been recorded, and they're all there and able to be viewed. The FOResT page also has commonly asked questions and answers. It has some videos for specific parts of the FOResT system. I'm trying to think of what else is on there. There is quite a lot of pretty good information, though, on the FOResT homepage. And so if you get stuck, it definitely is worth going to that homepage to check it out and try to solve the problem. If you really run into a jam and can't find the problem on the FOResT page, you can always email us at the email listed on this slide, or you can call 287-2791. Most likely, by calling that, you're going to get Stephen Nicholas, and he is one of the team members that's been with the project from the beginning. So he is a great person to help answer your questions if you're really in a bind. And that's all that I have for the overview presentation.